Hey, friends, welcome back to Notes from the Edge. I'm your host, Lisa Lacey, writer, trauma educator, executive advisor. This is the place where we talk about the things we should be talking about but aren't, the conversations we should have had the whole time. So, guys, today we're going to be talking about something that I think is so valuable and important, and I'm so excited to have been here to do this, and that is relationships. And why do intelligent, successful people keep finding themselves in the same type of relationship over and over and over? And you guys know from my work that I firmly believe if your relationships are solid, you can soar in this world. But if you have toxic relationships or there's a problem in them, then that's going to be all your little brain is going to be thinking about. So Ben's going to be helping us out with that today. Okay. He has a decades-long journey that spans Native American healing traditions, Taoist internal arts, meditation, and even some modern emotional healing. Together, he explores unconsciously why we repeat the same pattern, how trauma shapes our relationships, and then we talk about those original wounds today. All right, my friends. And remember, at the end, we're going to ask, what did he perform in order to survive? And then, how did his life change when he stopped doing that? Ben is a healer, teacher, author who has spent more than 3 decades helping people with emotional wounds, heartbreak. Heartbreak's a sneaky one because of the grief related to it, trauma, unhealthy relationship patterns. His own journey began. Dot dot dot. We're not going to tell you. We're going to have him tell us. Ben, welcome to the show, the place where we talk about the things we should be talking about, and we're going to talk about them. How are you today?
Oh, life is intense. So
It
much happening.
is.
Yeah.
It is. So much is happening, isn't it? Some strange things, some good things. So, Ben, we always start off with your origin story. So, how did you end up helping people and showing up in the world in the way that you are today?
Things were quite dysfunctional, chaotic. Grew up in a home where there were, like so many homes, hugely dysfunctional, and was also dealing with a lot of traumatic abuse along the way. But in the midst of all that, there was this fascination with Native Americans, and that only grew into adolescence. And when I learned about the traditional native doctors at the age of 14, I decided if I were given the opportunity, this is what I'll do with my life. Started saving money. By 17, I made my way as far as Oklahoma, was living in a community of Kiowa Indians, and spent many nights sitting up with the native elders in peyote meetings. And that's where I met my mentor, Horace, who was one of the last surviving traditional Kiowa doctors. And Horace transmitted portions of his own healing gifts to me during the apprenticeship. And then had me fast. The Vision Quest typically entails fasting 4 days and nights without food and water alone in the mountains. And so that's how it all began. In my mid 20s, there were a couple of years where I was, after apprenticing for a few years, I parked my ass back in college just to reassemble myself. But as it came time for graduation, it was like, wow, I actually have to work and support myself here. And and that was enough motivation to actually start working with people. And doing so had the effect of pouring hydrogen peroxide into an affected wound. Is like that's when
Ah,
a lot of the trauma,
came up
uh,
for you.
wounding that I was carrying, that's when it began to resurface. And and I was there were multiple factors at play because I was really giving thought to this earlier today as well. Was that on one hand, there's the trauma of the attachment wounds themselves, and there's the pattern of reenactment that was beginning to play out. But another huge factor was there's in many levels I'm like someone from centuries back, from how these native indigenous people lived. I feel like in so many respects I'm just, well, as everybody is to some extent, but adapting to this culture. And later on, for instance, there were periods of time where I really struggled, where I didn't feel like I was really connecting or resonating at a deep level. And it was like instinct, intuition. It was like, get on the plane, go to Sri Lanka. It's like, and I had all these frequent flyer miles. It's like, okay. I had no idea what was going on there at the time. The country was in the midst of a brutal war that had been going on for decades. And you get off the plane, and Sri Lanka was incredibly lawless in many respects. I mean, I was trying to figure out, get off the plane at midnight, go strolling through the airport. It's like, I guess I
Oh
better find a
no.
place to stay, and I'm pretty wiped out. And I walked up to this desk, government tourist board, and there were a lot of very, very dangerous, predatory people that should have been locked up, were roaming. But there are also very, very incredibly kind, caring people, who will look out for you. And so the man at the tourist board desk, he made some calls. He actually sent one of his subordinates in the taxi with me to the
Wow.
boarding
He's like,
house
he needs an escort. Yeah, we'll
to make
be
sure I get
escorting
to
him.
there alive. It was that
Wow.
dangerous. Yeah.
Wow, you chose the place. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
there
chose
were
the
like
place.
soldiers behind sandbag barricades and machine guns, because they were
Wow.
waiting for attacks and stuff. But what I found is as I was spending time in Sri Lanka, there was just this really deep resonance with a lot of the people. And so on one hand, there was the attachment wounding, and then on the other, there was also, I recognized that a lot of the struggle I had in relationships pertaining to lack of resonance.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are
Yeah.
multiple.
We try to get people to resonance at the end of our working with them.
Yeah.
Alignment is so very important. It's everything. You're either in alignment, out of alignment. You're in alignment, things just feel different. So you've pretty much had every path toward healing. And you say that sometimes healing does begin with suffering. All right.
Yeah.
Take us back to the version of you before the teacher, while you were working with your mentor. What happened in your life that made you realize that you didn't just have bad relationships, that you were repeating a cycle? Where was that epiphany, or was it just gradually over time for you?
It was gradually over time. There was a huge amount of dissociation. Like, I was very disconnected from my body. People would comment on it, that it was kind of spacey or checked out at times. And my mentor, to this day, I have yet to see or even hear of a healer. And it's, again, one of the last surviving traditional Kiowa Indian doctors. I've yet to see or hear of anyone as powerful as he was for treating the physical, and be working with people with cancer, leukemia, and people who were not expected to live, and they thrive. They were doing quite well.
So you saw it firsthand, and once you see
Yeah.
that, you can't unsee that. I mean,
Definitely.
it changes everything about how you see the world. And I think so many people don't believe that that can happen. And it's unfortunate, because if they believe it can't happen, it's not going to happen.
Despite the fact that he was so gifted when it came to working with all these physical conditions, he didn't really address the emotional component. It wasn't so much part of the culture or the understanding that was available in those days. And so he carried his own trauma that was left unresolved. And there was, toward the latter part of the apprenticeship, he was acting out that it was like being a day and night simultaneously, a string of miracles on one hand and absolute chaos on the other.
Yeah.
And I've seen that too play out with prominent Buddhist teachers, with people in the Hindu Vedic tradition, Sufi masters. It's
Well, we're all
there's this
human at our core, you
yeah,
know?
it's this thing called spiritual bypassing where a lot of people they think they're exempt, because they've attained these levels of spiritual mastery. They're in a sense believing they're exempt from having to deal with this lower
The
vibrational
suffering.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I
And
get it.
and
Yeah.
so that power is impartial. And so what happens is, even though the parts of our conscious mind, the persona, we don't register a lot of what's happening, there's a lot of aspects of ourself we don't fully recognize or see. We're enacting them and other people see how crazy dysfunctional it is. But there's ways we have these blind spots or perceptive gaps. And so he taught me a lesson he never intended to teach me. So there's a combination of watching him and what he enacted, and there was a huge having to reconcile on my part, like, did I get anything? Was there really value to this? Eventually I came to understand, yeah, there's tremendous power here and tremendous value. And at the same time, there's this other huge component of work. And also the fact that I had so much of my own traumatic wounding surfacing. And people are wired up a bit differently. I see many people who can compartmentalize, and they push those shadow aspects down, and they're disconnected from them, and they're operating from that part they identify with. They're numbed out, they're out of touch with the pain, and whatever means they use to do so. And they're not really feeling it. In my case, I was consumed by it. I could not escape from it. So
yeah,
I had all of this intense emotion flooding me. And again, this is around the time I was beginning to work with people. And there's also multiple factors. Again, I was transitioning from living among Native American communities. And the reason I left was because, at least in the community I was living in, there was like so much heavy drinking, self-destruction, and a number of my peers were dying in car crashes or fights, like being stabbed to death, or drinking, choking on their vomit, kind of like Jimi Hendrix did.
That's all a lot of trauma, just that alone, losing people in those ways. That's a lot of grief.
Yeah, and as the elders were dying out, and that knowledge, that medicine, the power they possessed, that was going with them. And in the younger generations, you had a lot of people with brown skin, but they have the genetic component, but they lack that power, that presence, that medicine that they carry.
And sometimes even the desire, to continue the traditions. So
yeah, a lot of them were afraid of it.
Yes, yes. Well, power is scary.
Yeah.
Power is scary. Let me ask you this. Okay, so we opened up, and remember I said that I think if our relationships are good, we're golden with other stuff. But if our relationships are bad, it affects us across the board. So let's kind of switch gears. Many people believe they're choosing the wrong partner, but you say something else is happening. So talk to me about that. How do our relationships, because everybody's going to want to hear this, tell us what parts of us are still wounded or need to be healed? And why do we call those lessons love? They're not always love.
Well, on one hand, we do have this tendency to find ourselves magnetized toward that which is familiar. It may not necessarily be love. A lot of times it's, even if we were abandoned as a child, we had a parent that checked out or just wasn't present, that was harshly critical, that we felt we had to perform for love. These things, even though possibly quite distressing at some level. That's what our physiology and our psyche has. It's what's known, what's familiar. So we find ourselves drawn towards that. And I think part of it is repetition compulsion. There's this deep aspect of our psyche that's wanting resolution, that's attempting to solve a problem. But the fact that the vast majority of us have never learned to work effectively with our emotions, we're not digesting either our lived experiences, our emotions. What happens is this patterning becomes reinforced through subsequent reenactments. It's digging the groove deeper. And so each time we go through these reenactments, it's evoking more of the same distressing emotions, possibly lots of other distressing or horribly unpleasant emotions.
Well, and some of it's biology too, because these relationships do affect us biologically as well. So yeah,
that's why I said our physiology. As well. There's the whole.
People miss that. And people end up sick. They don't do their healing work, and it eventually takes a toll on their body. So it is important to find those emotional wounds. Okay, keep going. You're on it.
And so sadly, many people just not knowing what to do, how to heal, how to move towards the healthier, loving relationships. They continue the cycle of reenactment. It just perpetuates itself. And a lot of people give up on relationships because they were hurt so many times and repeated betrayals and abandonments. And
they just get tired.
And because we don't digest those lived experiences and our emotional responses to it, those emotions continue to live within our bodies. And it creates this buffering. A lot of it, again, because of the numbing, we deny, we suppress, we distract ourselves, we self-medicate with food, alcohol, other recreational drugs, maybe even go on pharmaceuticals so as not to feel. And if we're not doing the deep level processing, if we're not digesting that, it continues to live within our bodies. So even if we do encounter someone, there's all this additional buffering that creates a much broader gap between ourselves and any potential partner. Maybe someone truly wonderful can come along, and yet we're fearful, we're guarded, we're mistrusting. We're perceiving the person that we could potentially partner with, or the person we do become involved with, it's being filtered through our past.
Of course it is. Because that's the only evidence we have, right? And our ego uses it as information to go, oh, this happened, so this is what's supposed to keep happening. Like me, I married my mother and became my father in my second marriage, to repeat that pattern. So we repeat it until we don't. So your background is incredibly unique. You've studied you've studied with and under Native American healers, Taoist masters, and have your own system that it sounds like it involves the emotional wounds on top of everything else. How do you see all of your past history and your experience and your skills kind of coming together in how you help people today?
My mentor could be very quiet, introspective. We travel vast different distances across the country and you'd hardly say a word. But there were times when he would say something and it really struck me. And at one point he's saying to me, you're going to really scrape bottom, because if you don't, you will never understand the suffering of the people you're working with. You're going to be extraordinarily good one of these days, but in the meantime, you're going to go through a lot of hell.
Damn.
And
that's bad news.
yeah, and I just kind of like didn't quite know what to think of it at the time when he said that, but it stuck with me. It registered. And so a lot of people are struggling in relationships, and these dynamics keep playing out. They can spend years or even decades sometimes in psychotherapy. And I went through psychotherapy for a few years. It's a very important part of my own and many other people's healing journey. I recommend, I encourage it. Yet what was happening is that I kept attracting the same type of individual, reenacting those patterns. And so instinctively, I had the sense I needed to dive into the depths of all those emotions that were surfacing. And it was putting me in touch with the pain around those attachment wounds. And I would go so deep into the depths of what I was feeling, and I would sometimes breathe for hours on end. At a certain point, I could feel it breaking open, the pain coming out of my body in waves. And there was these emanations of warmth that were arising from within. And that began the process of dissolving those unhealthy attachments. It didn't take long, though, to run into the limitations of my body and mind's own innate healing intelligence. That's when I began exploring any therapeutic interventions that held promise, deep tissue body work, acupuncture, working with a homeopathic physician, sessions with gifted healers, and the Vision Quest, the latter two being the most powerful. There were very few gifted healers working on a comparable level that I could go to. So I primarily relied upon the Vision Quest. Had I not gone through all these Vision Quests, so much of this wounding, this trauma would have never healed. And I see that in so many people. A lot of it has to do with the fact that I've gone through this myself, having struggled with this attachment wounding. Enables me to be of assistance. I mean, on the other hand, there are times where I've worked with returning vets, or vets who
that's a hard transition.
Yeah, who would maybe they served at some point. I'm older than I appear, but working with people who had served in Vietnam, say, and they're still carrying a lot of the traumatic wounding from Vietnam, and definitely Iraq and Afghanistan, and I haven't. I spent a lot of time in Sri Lanka and walked past bombings 1 minute after it occurred, but I haven't actually been in combat, so I don't so much have that trauma firsthand. Although many of my friends, Sri Lanka had the second highest number of enforced disappearances in the entire world at one hand. So many of my friends, their loved ones were snatched, disappeared, and tortured and killed, and it's horrific history there. So maybe I kind of absorb some of that through osmosis, but so we can't experience like every trauma necessarily, but I have, I guess, through the extent of my own wounding, it's enabled me to work with people, whether childhood physical, sexual trauma, those with combat-related experience, and those especially with attachment wounds. That comes very easily for me to work with that. I've people cycling through disastrous relationships, and so I walk people through these practices that I've developed, and that starts them on the process of digesting their lived experiences and their emotional responses to everything all the crazy relational dysfunction they're going through. And then other aspects of the healing as well, like training with this Chinese master, Shifu Li Taoliang, and Xin Yi Quan, Bakwa Sang. There's a lot of intensive internal practice Qigong. I'll teach those practices as well to people who stick around for a while. And these internal Taoist practices help to build a lot of foundation, so you're much more physically, mentally, and emotionally resilient. The fact that I was carrying so much trauma, this backlog of emotional residue, as so many people are, and I was suffering from it tremendously. A big part of my training, ongoing healing, is the Vision Quest, the 4 days and nights fasting along the mountains, the Wichita Mountains, without food and water.
Oh, wow.
It's
Beautiful.
harsh. It's brutal. The weather is pretty extreme there. I've been up there when it's in the 90s, and without water, it's extremely difficult. And
But you come out with the clarity that you went in to seek, correct?
well, during especially the fourth night, there are times where I'll feel this. Sorry. There are times where I could feel this extraordinarily powerful presence descend into my body. And there are times where it feels like a near-death experience. In some instances, it has gone all the way back to like early childhood trauma or other events, even up into my teens, but events I had completely forgotten about, or some I had a vague recollection of.
But your body didn't, because it was bringing it up to be cleared. That's amazing.
It's
That's
all
amazing.
coming back, all the vivid
Yeah.
sensory impressions, all the emotions. Thought
So that's the
processes.
exact same thing you do with your clients. Walk them through how to move those emotions up and out so
Well,
that they can think more clearly.
When I'm on the mountain, what happens, and the native people would talk about this, these other forces or beings come into your body, and I would be digesting these traumatic events, and even more recent adversity or relational drama or whatever I was going through. And there's also something like, as these native doctors would go through the Vision Quest, they would receive what's referred to as medicine. So the native doctors had the areas of specialization, like some worked primarily with individuals with, say, neurological disorders, or like respiratory or digestive, or something like stroke or heart disease, whatever. They were known for their areas of specialty. So that was happening for me too. I would be receiving these different kinds of gifts, what they refer to as medicine. Mm-hmm. And people were reflecting that back to me, or as I would work with them, and they would be describing what was happening for them during the sessions. When I work with people individually, the native indigenous healers among the Native Americans and other indigenous cultures, like you find in Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, other indigenous groups around the world, are primarily conduits. That there's this understanding that as human beings, there's this limitation of what we're capable of doing or facilitating on our own. And so you had these groups that lived so close to the earth, that lived close to nature, were in touch with the forces of nature. And a lot of this is very hard to grasp for people who haven't ever experienced this firsthand. It's foreign. And yet, for instance, a former girlfriend years back, her father had malignant tumors growing within his bladder, and she and her brother were like, "Dad, just try it." It's just, they want to do whatever they can to help to alleviate his pain and keep him around. And I got to work with him one time, and before he was in pain, confined to bed, and really suffering and peeing blood, and it was a mess. And the one session I got to do for him was like, he was having relatively pain-free days. He was up and about and feeling quite good. And making little trips through Kansas and Missouri to see friends and family members, driving around. And my ex-girlfriend then was telling me, she said, the next day he didn't quite know what to do. The man had drank considerably for much of his life, and he was flooded with emotion. And that's one aspect of this work, is that as I work with people, it's going to bring whatever they're carrying in their bodies, whatever
Yeah.
the impressions.
When it's time.
Yeah.
And I firmly believe that the trauma will show up to be healed and looked at and witnessed when it's time. Some of it, the reason we don't, I just think we weren't ready, right? It would have been too much to look at years ago.
There's also, like, in this culture, the whole avoidant tendency has become more ingrained into our culture. There's very much an escape aspect to our culture. And
oh, yes.
yeah. And so.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so because of that, you have a lot of people when stuff is, their emotions and traumatic wounding, all this is surfacing, and they bolt. And that's really sad. It's really unfortunate. I know in some instances, like if you're doing deep tissue body work there, and which I do recommend, it's a very valuable therapeutic intervention. But what I find is that some therapies, and I've seen this even with EMDR, for instance, eye movement reprocessing desensitization, where there's a woman I worked with years ago, and she was flooded with so much overwhelming emotion and just all this emotional residue that she wasn't capable of processing or digesting.
Yeah.
And I could see it, I could feel it. It was blowing her out of the water. And on one hand, I found it helpful in the work I came behind afterwards. And what was helpful is that it dislodged a lot of this emotion, this traumatic wounding she was carrying. By itself, with the EMDR, her system couldn't cope with it. She could not process that. And I've seen that with deep tissue body work too. When I followed up and came in with the sessions, working as a conduit, this presence working through me was literally taking all this lived experience, the impressions thereof, all of that convoluted, undigested emotion. And we'd say experience trauma like that, being physically, sexually abused. And that happened very early in her life. That's not being processed or digested. That's accumulating within her body. It literally putrefies. It sits there. It's undigested.
I love that word, putrefies. It's going to fester.
Yeah, in the body, after all these years or decades, it's like, what do I do?
It's like, nope, I'm not going to work on you anymore. That's what it does.
Yeah, and so this presence working through me will take that content, transmute it, and then the person can thoroughly digest it. It's being digested like the food they eat, and it's transformed so that it becomes fuel for growth. Now, the unfortunate thing, and I do the best I can with each individual to communicate. There are some instances where, say, I work with a person and they, maybe I see them once or something, and they have all this emotion coming up, and instead of just, I will follow up. I will get on the phone. I will call. I will talk with them. Hey, you can reach me. I turn my phone off when I sleep. Yeah,
I love that. So why is awareness? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Before, I do everything I can to make it clear to people, I am here for you. And if this is coming up, this is surfacing, you can call me. I turn my phone off when I sleep at night, but other than that, you can reach me. I will get back to you, definitely. And there are some people, to despite to the best of my ability, I am going to be there. And but some people are just going to run. You know,
They
it's
do.
and it's sad. It's painful for me when I see that happen because I know the unfortunate consequences. When people bolt, they disappear because that kind of trauma does not heal on its own. And you'll see many people carry that even to their grave. It just, without effective intervention, that will not heal, that will not transform. Those who stick with the process, gradually they're digesting more and more that lived experience, that backlog of emotion. As that happens, new foundations take its shape. They become stronger, more resilient. And
I love that.
It's building that foundation. And so I see these individuals, even those who were severely traumatized, and they're becoming strong, capable, present, resilient. They have so many more resources.
Yeah, resources, tools, things we weren't taught. Sometimes it helps working with another person. Speaking of that, where can people find you if they're like, man, this seems like it would be a very good fit? Where can they find you to work with you?
There are a number of locations. Let's say my main website, benufana.com. I'll send that over in the show notes. There is a contact form. That's the best way to reach me. Message me first, and if you prefer, leave your phone number. And to go in depth, I need to talk with you by phone anyway. I can't write for hours.
I don't like the back and forth either. I'd rather an old school phone call, to be quite honest.
Yeah, there's a blog with a section that says articles, a lot of in-depth articles. There's another website, teachmetomeditate.com. And because I teach this whole series of intensive meditation practices, there's Heal My Heartache for people who are struggling with abandonment, attachment wounds, keep cycling through the same kinds of abusive, toxic relational dynamics. Breakup first aid if you're in the midst of the crash itself and people are just really need someone to talk to. There's heartachehotline.com.
I love
You
that.
can also find me on Instagram and on there's my YouTube channel with
yeah, we're going to post all of that. We're going to post absolutely everything in the show notes. What I loved about today is we always talk about this. There are so many different modalities to healing, and having support underneath you changes and shifts everything. And having somebody that can help you transmute, well, one, discover, right? Because when you've buried them for so long, they're hard to see. So one, discover them, but two, transmute them so that you can move forward in a sense of freedom. Well, Ben, before we close out, we always ask our guests one question. What did you perform in order to survive your life? And how did life change when you dropped the role, mask, or performance to just be you?
I don't know that, I know that they talk a lot about, how we assume various roles, like the caregiver or perfectionist. And for me, I don't know that it was so much of a role. It was just more of a matter of being hugely dissociated and disconnected from my body and carrying so much trauma. So when we carry such significant trauma, that becomes a filter through which we perceive our relationships and other people, our interactions, all that. And so for me, it was just the profound emotional wounding dissociation. And
I love that too, that you named it. And we learned that too, guys. The word trigger is so overused. I'm triggered. We're still hurt. Well, we're still hurt from the thing that happened when we were 10, and we need to look at it, right? Right, Ben?
yeah,
We need to start looking at it and moving that up and out, because we're all acting like children some days.
It's like the word. It's like the word regulate is also highly overused, and a lot of people, they internalize all this therapy speak language, but you can
You can heal without it. You can heal without it. All right, Ben, thank you
definitely.
so much. This has been such a pleasure. We're going to send tons of people your way. We're going to plaster your information everywhere. I may even be giving you a call. Heck, I don't know. I love each and every one of you guys when you come on the show, and I laugh and giggle and think my coaching budget is going to be huge this month because I want to work with each and every one of you because you guys are so unique in your amazing modality. So thank you for coming on. All right, my friends, listen, you guys ask yourself the question, what did you perform in order to survive? And is it still serving you? If it is, fantastic. But if it isn't, it might be time for a little change. Reach out to me, reach out to Ben. Welcome to the edge, my friends.